Light blue bubbles, reflecting the moonlight. Fragile and ephemeral, like flowers blooming at night. Traces of a creature, graceful in its precision. Noble yet beguiling, an entrancing vision.
What's good, everyone? It's your boy Dak908, aka the Dig Dug himself, and Monster Hunters and Monster Hunties. Check it out. Today we are going to be looking at Mizutsune. Now, Mizutsune, if you guys don't know, is one of the flagship monsters from Generations. Now, it's a hugely popular monster, a grand fan favorite. A lot of people like this monster. Most importantly, though, the reason being is the design. Like, the design for this monster, even I have to admit, is pretty smacking, but it's also because I'm a little biased and I really like Leviathans, and it's technically a Leviathan, but nevertheless. So Mizutsune is a bubbly monster who got his introduction in Monster Hunter Gen. It was one of the 4 flagships, like I said before, and it made it in, it's been in every game since, minus World, because you know they had to only get one and they chose Glavenus, but in all the other games it's made an appearance, which isn't that many, but nevertheless it's been around. It's gonna get around, it's gonna stay around because people really love this thing. Nevertheless, so the most notable thing about him is the bubbles. Everyone knows my man got bubbles for days. So let's talk about these bubbles, because I mean, we're gonna need to, in a little space, talk about a lot of stuff. And the first thing we should really note is those bubbles. So as I'm getting lost trying to find this monster, I will let you guys know what to do. It shoots a plethora of different bubbles. It has, I guess you can call them standard bubbles. Forgive me, I'm colorblind. I don't know what color these standard bubbles are. I think they're like white. But he has green bubbles. He has red bubbles. And my color blindness is killing me here, but I'm pretty sure, well, I'm thinking that he has another bubble that like helps with defense. I don't know. If not, that's fine, because the only one you really need to understand is red and green. What does red do? If you run into a red bubble, it'll actually give you a tiny attack buff. If you run into a green bubble, it'll heal you. Granted, though, if you walk into too many of these bubbles, you'll get hit with this own particular state called bubble. I think that's really what it's called. And if you're in the bubble form, you lose a bit of control of your hunter. So you'll be doing an attack or whatever you'll be trying to move, and then your hunter will be like, whoa, I'm slipping in bubbles. So you have to watch out for that. Before, it wasn't that big of an issue. Now it's a bit more of an issue, but also not that big of an issue, because you can still have your weapon out. You can still do certain things with it. It's just every now and then you'll be hit with a particular trip up, and then you'll be slipping a little bit, but you can still use your weapon. So it's not the end of the world, but losing your ability to actually attack in certain cases, especially when it's super crucial, is going to be a bit of a bummer. So for those of us who like to play a little reckless, those of us who actually really like to stay in the butt cheek of the monster, try to fight it even though we're hit with this bubbly effect, be warned that it could very well backfire on you, and you could take a fat L. Now, it has a particular ability on its own armor set that allows you to actually be even more saucier when you're bubbled up, but we're going to get to that in a minute. Nevertheless, so for those of you who actually fought the Mizutsune, take note that almost everything that's ever been on the Mizutsune is still the exact same. There's a couple of things we are going to talk about for those, but for those who haven't, we'll get to those things later, but let's talk about the things that it can do off the rip. So Mizutsune is a very slippery monster, no pun intended, but it likes to move around a lot. Like, it will jump, it'll pounce, it'll leap and bound, it'll spin around in circles. It does all these things quite avidly. Now, it's a quite powerful monster, don't get it twisted, and it's pretty armored as well. More so than what it used to be. Well, it's less than what it used to be. More so back in the day, it was almost impossible to hit on its stomach, but in this game, the hardest part for you to actually hit this monster on are going to be its claws and its stomach. Mind you, once you get into like maybe like orange sharpness, if you ever decide to get there for whatever reason, like I myself get there a couple of times, you will just bounce immediately. So take note that he has relatively armored bits on his body. Now, outside of that armored bit, he has a plethora of different attacks, so you should really watch out for anything where he throws his body around. He loves to throw his body around, and it does a large amount of damage, and it's actually quite deceptive too. The hitbox on it is what I mean. So he'll coil up, and then he'll either throw his tail at you or he'll just pounce on you. These things do a lot of damage because, well, I don't know. I genuinely don't know why, but it just does so much damage. If you're watching a video, you see me get hit by like all of them, like all the time. And I'm constantly getting like smacked like super stupid hard. But just note that the biggest thing for him though is they have some incredibly large tails. Not his actual tail, but like you can watch him do a thing and you can see how it actually allows him to do the attack. So he'll coil up, like I said. You can see him coil up. If you're not using a weapon that locks you into a particular animation for a long period of time, you can, for the most part, get the upper hand on him because it's not like the end of the world for you. But if you're a user like a Lancer or, I don't know, maybe a Greatsword user in certain cases, you might get caught slipping, and it could be a bit of a detriment to you, but for the most part, it's not going to be the end of the world. Just keep your health topped off, and you should be relatively okay. Now, outside of his body attacks, which is something you should really note for, I talked about how he's slippery and he spins around and he pounces all over the place. That's technically an attack. Like, he'll pounce and bound and then do a quick little spin cycle, like right there. That is technically an attack. You're probably not going to get hit by it, but just watch out for it. It didn't really do too much, but what it's really doing is just throwing more bubbles and stuff in the air. So that's that. Now, the last thing we need to talk about his beam. This is the thing, for those of you who've never fought, well, those of us who fought Mizutsune before, this is the one thing I should really pay attention to. Everything else is old hat. This is new stuff. Now, Mizutsune has an upgraded beam. Before, it would just, like, shoot the beam and that was it. Now, it can do, like, the slippery slide on the beam, okay? Like, it'll actually bubble itself up a little bit, and then it'll, like, get ready to do his beam. He'll, like, throw his neck up, throw it down, and he's sliding. He's literally sliding across the horizontally, usually sliding horizontally, spitting the beam at the same time. This attack is pretty ambiguous. He will go in a relatively horizontal pattern, but he'll curve it in some instances. So you'll think that you're completely fine if you try and go in one direction, but no, it's not. Also, his beam is actually pretty far hitting beam. So you're gonna have to be quite a ways away to completely be away from it if you're like in the path of it. Outside of that particular beam, what it can also do is it can do its beam in like a spin cycle. So do you guys remember the spin cycle before? Now imagine the spin cycle, but with the beam attached to it. It's wild. You have to watch for these things. These attacks are pretty. The first time I got hit by it was the first time it ever happened, and my jaw hit the ground. I couldn't pretend that it wasn't freaking cool, but it was seriously cool. So he has those new attacks that are pretty interesting, especially for those of us who've actually been around for a while. And we always hope that a monster gets a new attack. It's actually refreshing to see him get an attack so saucy like that. But for the most part, that's essentially all his attacks and so on. I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys exactly every minute thing to actually fight him. Just know he's going to be getting around on you a lot. By that I mean he's going to try his absolute best to get around you and attack you in your blind spot. That's his big thing, and he has the mobility to do so between just jumping over, sliding over, or just creating a large plethora of things in front of you, making you have to navigate his bullet hell. He'll get around you in one way or another. Oh, and before I forget, I totally almost forgot, he has the water bullet. Now the water bullet is another new attack, and it's kind of a charged up attack. You will see him do it. He'll coil up almost like he's gonna throw his body at you, but it's like a really high density charged shot of water. The range on it, I'm not entirely sure. Every time I get hit by it or he throws it out, I'm usually very close, so I don't know the range on it per se, but you should pay attention to it because it hurts a lot. I think it might be his newest hardest hitting attack, so please watch out for it. I think he does it in this video a time or two. You'll see it. I should probably slow it down for you guys so you can really know what I'm talking about, because it's kind of like if you miss it, you don't, like, it's kind of easy to miss because it's just a quick water bullet, just really quick. But yeah, outside all of that, let's take a look at his gear because it's actually pretty smacking. Okay, now that we're taking a look at the armor and such, let's talk about some very important skills. First and foremost, Resuscitate. Well, not first and foremost. It's first, but not foremost. But anyway, Resuscitate. Essentially, all Resuscitate is whenever you have a little bit of red health, you get an attack boost. And if we take a gander, Hold on. How do you do it? Okay. Okay, so when you have, when you are suffering from an abnormal ability, this is actually OD. I remember the skill now that I mention it. I'm thinking resentment. Resentment is the skill I was thinking of. I apologize. Resuscitate is whenever you're suffering from an ailment or blight, you get an attack increase. For the high rank set, you're going to get an attack increase of plus 20. Now, this is when it gets sauce. Note that it says when suffering from abnormal status. What is abnormal status? Paralysis, sleep, blast blight, any kind of blight, you know, any kind of ailment, if you will. Now, Bubbly Dance. Let's take a look at Bubbly Dance. Boom. Okay, reduces bubble blight and grants increased evasion when afflicted. Let's talk about this. Remember when I said earlier that when you get all bubbled up, you lose your, control of your hunter? With Bubbly Dance, you actually don't get that to proc often, you know what I mean? And so that way you can actually be bubbled up and you're not going to be slipping all over the place. Granted, there might be a time here, there, and thither, don't take me for gospel, that where you will be bubbled up and you'll lose control of your character. Don't know, I don't really run Mizutsune armor all that much, but for the most part, the thing that you really need to know from this is you can actually bubble yourself up by rolling around. Very, very, very akin to how Mizutsune bubbles himself up. So if you do a couple of dodges, you'll get bubbles on you. When you get bubbles on you, you get a free plus 20 attack slap. Bam. And then on top of it, if you get bubbled up and you get the attack boost, you're gonna have increased evasion. So it's like having evade window like 5 or something like that. So it's essentially having these two skills together. It's like 4 skills in one, well, in 2, double the skills. Pretty freaking godlike. And last but not least, free meal because food. Now let's take a look at the low rank joint. The low rank joint is kinda not as much sauce because water attack, but you still get Bubbly Dance and then free meal. But the thing to know from this is actually Bubbly Dance. The high rank set is actually perfect. What I used to do a long time ago, I'm tangenting, but there was what was that monster called? Can't remember what it's called. Granola bar. You know who I'm talking about. Granola bar had an armor set that gave you Resuscitate off the rip. What I tried to do and what I actually did was gem in Bubbly Dance. It wasn't called Bubbly Dance back then, but I gemmed it in so that way I can proc my own abnormal status whenever I wanted to, so that way I can have the extra smack on top of having resentment, which gave you an attack boost if you had red health. It was a pretty godlike set. Nevertheless, that's the armor. Now for the weapons, briefly let's talk about this. His weapons are water based. They have high water, they have decent attack. They're gonna be in that tree where you have a lot of element, and the best attack to sharpness you'll probably get. So for the most part, it's going to be some very decent, very good end game water weapons. And he's the flagship, so he has a weapon in every single category. So yeah, his gear is actually really dope, and I highly recommend it, especially if you want to go out there with a really cool Bubbly Dance Resuscitate combination. So to recap, let's take a look. Mizutsune is a monster who loves to get behind you. He attacks from all sides, and he can do this with little to no efforts, essentially effortlessly, because he can bubble himself up, making him a lot more slippery, so that way he can use all these really wild maneuvers, so that way he can get in the most advantageous position for himself. When he's all bubbled up, or when the bubbles are getting to flying all over the place, there are certain bubbles that can actually grant you buffs. There are green bubbles that actually can heal you. There are red bubbles that can give you an attack bonus. Watch out though, as you can collect these things, you will get hit what's known as Bubble Blight. Bubble Blight allows, well, it forces you rather, to kind of lose control of your hunter in certain situations whenever it would proc. Other than that, you can still move around a little bit, granted a little slippery, and you can still do your attacks and whatnot. However, don't get too reckless, because if you do, you'll put yourself in a situation where you lose control of your hunter completely, and you can get smacked very, very hard. He has a plethora of different attacks that actually hit pretty good, and a lot of them are relatively ambiguous. He can and will cross you up with a couple of these as well. Watch out for his slippery slide beams, because he can actually bubble himself up and do like this weird electric slide joint and then slide around the map, hitting you with his beam. Pretty godlike. He can also do the beam when he's spinning around and his little washing machine spin cycle joint. So of course, watch out for these beam attacks. Actually, when he gets to throwing at the beam, watch out for the beam. It's gonna smack you pretty daggum hard. Other than that, his gear is immaculate. I do recommend it. It looks great, it works great, and it's just sauce. But yeah, that's everything. With that being said, everyone, it's been your boy Dak908, aka the Dig Dome. So thanks so much for watching, and I want to plug the Discord and the Twitter. Again, these are the only social things that I usually am on. And if you want to play with me or want to get to know more about me, hit me up on the Discord, or you can hit me up on the Twitter. The Twitter is how you stay up to date with the videos that I'm going to be making and whatnot, and the Discord is how you get to know and kick it with your boy. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. It's been fun. I am going to have a different video up for you guys next time. The next Monster Hunter Dex video will probably be this Friday for those watching on a Monday. But with that said, it's been your boy. Take care.